Help Save Our World Speak number 81. Notes to bear in mind. Becoming a wise guide and teacher begins with self-mastery. You do this by practicing your skills as a role model, a guide, and a teacher. Hello, I'm Dennis Moore, your host for the next hour. Welcome to our 81st Help Save Our World Speak online speakers meeting, where we are changing the conversation to change our world. These meetings are the follow-on from our book, Beyond the Age of Ignorance, The Quest for the Truth, Change and Transformation. Our vision is to create a love-based, happy, healthy, and sustainable future for all life on Mother Earth. We believe that the only way to help save our world is to empower you with the truth, knowledge, skills, and wisdom that you need to change your life so you can help us help save our world. We cannot do this alone. That's why we're empowering you to join us. So together, we can make a meaningful difference in our world and create a magical future for our children and all life on our home planet, Mother Earth. Let's start with introductions. Kurt?
Good day. This is Kurt. I'm checking in from the northeastern section of the state of Colorado at the edge of the Rocky Mountains. And it's absolutely beautiful out here, very different from the Florida I've been attending from. And I'm on this call because I continue to find value in helping save our world. And of course, by helping save myself from the negative patterns that may have been instilled in me throughout my lifetime.
Excellent. Thank you, Kurt. Brendan?
Hi, I'm Brendan. I am currently in South Africa. I am part of this conversation to help better myself, number one, so that I can better others around me. And also to conserve nature and help nature to help provide for us.
Excellent. Thank you, Brendan. Alex?
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm here in South Africa and I'm part of this group just to try and help save the world the best I possibly can in my lifetime.
Thank you, Alex. Now, last week, like I said, we reached the end of my book, Beyond the Age of Ignorance. Well, what I wanted to put in there, but this process is an ongoing process. So what now? Important notes. Things that I thought needed to be brought up, but maybe would be hard to discuss sort of on video in prime time, like with everyone listening and so on, which I'll put into these notes at the end of this book before republishing it. So it's just also really important to realize that what we've done so far is really like this skeletal sort of foundations of where we can take this. With these essential foundations, you're at the beginning of your thought and creative journey. Practicing what you have learned, you can now sow, build, and grow your future based on the truth, love, balance, and harmony, which are the foundations of this whole thing. Other resources are Help Save Our World books and courses that the ones I've written already are Gifts and Feminine Revolution. And I might change titles and update those books to make them more current in relation to this new version of Beyond the Age of Ignorance. Those two books, Gifts and Feminine Revolution, are available on Amazon right now. So if anyone wants to read them, they are there. And of course, other books will follow. This book, Beyond the Age of Ignorance, is basically free online, but as this video series. But the first, we had the problem in the beginning of the book is I was doing a video and then I was posting it, and I got a whole lot of videos, up to about 10 videos going, and I was preparing to post and editing the videos, and I got robbed. So I lost a whole lot of videos there, and I lost my computer and all that sort of stuff. So it really just like upset the balance. I didn't have anything to edit with. So up until about 20 or 30 videos, I didn't post every single week. And then from there, somewhere in the 20s up until 80, I have been posting pretty regularly. So I have to go back and catch up with those ones that aren't up there. But basically, if you start at the beginning of the series and I post every week, at least one, you'll be able to follow by doing one of the hour videos each week. So that's my intention for that. And then, of course, there's a whole lot on books and things that I want to write, which you can discuss. And I've got speeches and everything on all of that. So in our next book and the continuation of this conversation, we will go into the things that we can do to create the changes we need to develop in our world. I will also be going back to the beginning to complete, edit, and post the videos that are not online yet in the above series. Then I will go on to marketing and posting podcasts and stories and interviews and publish more and more books. And so it'll be like this journey of creating more products and eventually sort of getting it all out there through good marketing. So that's the basic idea behind it. So these important notes that I wish to bring up. This whole journey has been about empowering you and your communities to once again live in love, balance, and harmony so that you can grow a fair, happy, healthy, and sustainable future for all life on Mother Earth. Now, you need to remember that knowledge, skills, and wisdom are power. Words are powerful. What did they say? The pen is mightier than the sword. It's just really important to realize that if we get this stuff out there, we can actually overcome all sorts of tyranny. So ignorance of the truth, on the other hand, means you lose power. Now, decentralization is about empowering you and all life around you. Localized life, energy, and power are critical to our survival on Earth. Decentralization into sustainable teaching eco-villages, localized living, natural living, as in permaculture communities and in tribes, it is all about taking back your individual and local community living systems, food security, water security, energy and power, which is at the core of what is necessary for our survival on Mother Earth. Your interaction and relationships with life, all life, are what ensures that life goes on. Our journey so far has been about empowering you, the individual, and your local communities. Your journey is to empower yourself and your community by decentralizing, growing your own, simplifying, accumulating and keeping local energy local within your local energy and living systems. Ultimately, we need to live in a caring, sharing, giving and receiving decentralized communities as tribes and eco-villages, all living as one world's people. In the short term, if you need to use money, make it a local currency and keep the local energy local, and don't support monopolistic national and international currencies, banking, stock exchanges, trade, commerce, and corporations. Do this to prevent the monopolization and centralization of ownership and power that creates and grows the beast. Right? Anybody?
Totally agree. No, I agree. Yeah.
Well, I say that we saw a small portion of this coming together and supporting one another in terms of the farmers basically handing out their stock to us for free during this whole riot stage. Okay, it wasn't free. They were covering their costs, but they weren't adding tax and all the other add-ons that the shops do, and I think it was very, very lovely. Yeah, you had to drive a bit further out of town to get your whatever you needed, but it was brilliant.
Yeah, that's a whole conversation. And I've written roughly some notes on that concept, but I haven't refined it. I haven't thoroughly gone into it. But really, I'm just going to briefly sort of cap on. So basically, there were riots, protests, and looting of warehouses and factories and shops and whatever in KwaZulu-Natal mainly, but also up in Johannesburg and in a few other places around the country. And the original motivation was that Jacob Zuma went to jail for some reason or other. So people reacted badly to that. But then it ended up in protests and riots. The issue with that was we're in a country where the unemployment rate is like 45% of the population is unemployed and starving in these rural areas and so on. So it's a pretty scary situation for most people to be in. And then there was an opportunity to go and shop for free. And basically equalize the imbalances of wealth in South Africa, and people just took advantage of that. And I don't see that as those people being bad. I see it as them taking a very real opportunity to try and recreate some of the imbalances of wealth and power and to survive. It's a short-term solution to go and break the stores and plunder and everything and loot. But at least those people now maybe have food and the potential to live where before they didn't, So I don't hold that against them. But for us on the other side, of course, of the fence, it's a totally different situation. We felt threatened and we needed to look after ourselves and protect ourselves. And so it was a very stressful time for us. But we seem to have made it through quite safely. So I'll save the rest of that for some other opportunity or situation. Anyone want to comment? Good.
Well, yeah, I think that when people have to resort to rioting, and I'll just use that term loosely, I don't know the whole situation there, but basically it's not that much different than a government bringing its armaments to another country and saying, we don't like the way you just behaved. And I think it's a pretty self-righteous attitude when people blame others for trying to survive while they hold the means for survival for the entire world. So not to excuse rioting, but when you have no other alternative and looting, that's what it turns to. And I'd like to withhold judgment on it and just look at it for what it is, people looking to survive. Now, of course, there are always a few people that are out there looking to make a profit off of the situation. But we're not talking about them in general. I think we're talking about people that need to let the system know that it's not working for them. And there are people that hold the solutions that are not releasing them. And that's why people resort to what they do. And we see it in countries as well. So let's not be self-righteous about those people are rioting, but our bombing other countries is not rioting.
Absolutely. There you got huge, powerful groups fighting for power and control over regions and resources. And they use the people as cannon fodder to actually do that. It's, I think that's just it's obscene, And really, it's really, if you think about it, the principles of this movement is fundamentally it's love, balance, and harmony. And love is about relationships. It's about caring and sharing and making sure everyone has that happy, healthy, and sustainable life and so on. So love is about relationships. It's about caring. And then balance is a fundamental principle of nature. You're balancing your water intake, your food intake, and that balancing concept is like the temperature balance in our atmosphere is being upset through global warming. Nature tries to maintain those balances. And then you have ownership of property and farms and wealth and power. This incredible centralization of wealth and power, creating these pyramid schemes and these monoliths of power, using extreme systems of force like war machines and so on, and laws, and they enforce the system that creates this incredible imbalance of power. And the only way that either the people in power realize that there's an imbalance and they correct it, and they start to, help support local indigenous farmers and so on, and create sustainable eco villages and all that sort of thing. Either they do that, or they've got to expect the people at some stage to say, okay, enough, no more, and to take back what's rightfully theirs. There has to be a balance of nature. And right throughout history, the rise and fall of civilizations is because of imbalance. People say eventually, like, no more, and the civilization collapses. So remember, when becoming a guide and setting an example for others or venturing out to teach them, be wary of your words. Words have weight, all right? So be wary of your words, then also be wary of your compromises and, of course, other people's judgments of what you've done or said. People or followers need to know, like, and trust you. So you need to be true to your word, as authentic as possible. Be consistent, reliable, honest, authentic, and don't lie or exaggerate. Be careful with your use of language and statements you might make. So speak the truth, because people can sense a lack of certainty or dishonesty a mile away. Remember, all you have to keep their attention is your credibility. The truth is easy to confidently talk about, while lies will eventually catch up with you. Then no one will believe you anymore. It's like crying wolf. You lie once and everyone's like, then twice, and it's like, really? And then third time, and sorry, I don't even listen to you anymore. And they're gone. So anyone want to comment on that? Good.
So this has been such a big part of my life for the past 30 years as a teacher, is working with students to communicate clearly what they are thinking and want to express, such that others get it in the way as close as possible to what they're saying and what they're thinking. And there have been many studies, as you know, and I think the science of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, deals a lot with this. And I won't go into teaching NLP here, but in a communication, and certainly with your words, there are a number of Ds, the letter D, such as deletion, distortion, distraction, and there are many others along that way, which includes lying, misrepresentation, etc. So we can use words to communicate clearly and make an honest connection and create an effective, loving relationship, or we can use them to manipulate, dominate, control, dissuade, etc. And the word propaganda definitely covers all of that. I think it's pushing an alternative that may or may not have anything to do with the person you're talking with, but it certainly serves your own agenda. So I agree with you. The process of speaking clearly and communicating clearly, and not just the words, as we know, our hand gestures, our facial gestures, etc., also impact how people receive our communication, the volume of our voice, etc. So when we look at what it takes to communicate, but especially with the words, it's very important. And as you can imagine, not everybody has the same definition of the same word that we're using. So there's also that as well. There's assumptions that people understand it the way you understand it, and that's not always the case. So in a communication, there's a feedback cycle, I would say, that requires us in a responsible way to make sure that they have gotten it as close to what we're thinking as possible. Because if we don't check in, if we don't allow the other person to respond and be in that response cycle, then we're just running our own story without any concern for another. So I think we have to look at not only choosing our words clearly and allowing another to give us feedback as to whether they're getting it or not at some appropriate point. And I know, Dennis, you've been doing this for now many, many months in these programs where we're working with a back and forth rather than a lecture situation. And I think, I'll speak for myself, but also for the others involved, I think it's a much more rich experience when people get to express themselves in the moment on that thought, rather than going down the road 15 or 20 minutes and then trying to figure out which of the many points that came across do I want to speak into. So that allowing people to have an immediate response, I think, is also important in the communication.
Yeah, I like that. It's actually been a journey from the beginning. I mean, I had no idea what we were going to do when I started out. I was like, oh, I just want to do videos online, and I want to base it on my book, but I have no idea how to do it. And so I tried all different techniques, but this technique you spoke about now has sort of played itself out and has become sort of more refined as we've moved along. So yeah, it is important. And yeah, people understanding and interpreting what you said because of the totality of their life, their life's experience, their knowledge, their blah, blah, blah. There's so many variables. So if people interpret things differently. Yeah.
And I think you're right, that iteration process or that iterative process of figuring out, well, I got this, and then let me work it and let me work it. That's exactly what relationships are, isn't it? Whether we're teacher and students or a husband and wife or father and child, whatever it may be, allowing that iterative process to happen so that we're in a dynamic relationship with another one, not a static one. And again, we're beings, right? We're not done. So we don't want to fix ourselves to a particular thought process that may or may not serve us a minute from now or a month from now. However, understanding it clearly when it's coming across, I think, is important.
Yeah, and amazing how our conversations have expanded into so much more than what my original sort of ideas were, just because of this process. You know?
I just have one more quick point on that.
Go for it.
And that's, let's consider the people that are viewing this who haven't had that same iterative journey that we all have. And so they're coming into it, and they might not have the same interpretations or level of understanding or frame of reference that we've been working with for a year and change. So blessings and congratulations for people that have made it this far and are watching, and know that I'm sure Dennis and the group is always open for questions and clarifications if need be on it. So stay with the process, and if you jumped in and you're traveling with us right now, wonderful. And if not, then ask questions. Don't stay unadvised, I guess.
I mean, ideally, if people sort of start at the beginning and go through the process, because jumping in near the end, it'd be like, no, what are you saying? You know, and like a lack of comprehension. And I quite often find that, you know, when people are with us for a while and then they miss out a few and then they come back, their conversation hasn't included that, like those critical lessons in between. And then, so to really get with the whole concept, it's better to travel the whole journey, you know, and try and be consistent, you know. And then, yeah, as you're going, you know, you can put comments in, you can like and subscribe and whatever, and we can create, you know, maybe bring you into various meetings and we can have open discussions in a different forum, you know, or same forum, but just at a later date. So now, this is like a really important thing, is quite often I have people like, oh, you know, you just called yourself Dennis the teacher. And I'm like, I am a teacher, so I'm going to call myself by my name and tell everyone I'm a teacher, it's like, but anyway, it's like, and, oh, you're telling us to do this. And if you're so perfect, and I'm like, I'm not perfect. And perfection actually is impossible. And so I wrote this thing, I'm not perfect and perfection is impossible. Although I do strive to be the best person I can be. I mean, that's all we can do, can just do our best. I'm not perfect and make mistakes all the time, as I've done throughout my life, and I'll continue making mistakes. And I think that's one of the fundamentals of life. Life is all about making those mistakes, falling, getting up, dusting yourself off, learning from them, and trying again, correcting your behavior as best you can, and just try and try and try again. Although I know perfection is impossible, I strive to live my best life and be authentic. Even if we strive to achieve perfect alignment only happens flightingly as we flow from being out of the alignment and then through alignment and out of alignment on the other side. Alignment is a process of constantly correcting and refocusing and heading back for realignment again and again. Alignment and the best you can be is all vibrations or cycles of motion on your journey. And that's, of course, if you choose it, if you choose to try and be in alignment. Too far out of alignment, and you suffer greatly. And then through alignment, and then too far out of alignment in the other, the greater you get out of alignment, the greater the consequences, the more you suffer. So it's this happily trying to do your best, but always trying to sort of strive to be your ultimate self. And of course, nobody's perfect. From the absolutist, judgmental point of view, we can never, ever be perfect. Also, trying to change everything immediately is not easy, and if you don't have the resources, not possible. So unfortunately, we will have to make some necessary temporary compromises, and we might be judged for doing so as being inauthentic. Now, I've got a good example of that. Say, for example, we want to create these sustainable teaching eco-villages, and we want them all to be food security, water security, we want everything done like today. And right now we're having riots in the streets, and basically we need all these people to go and be in these sustainable eco-villages and everything to be growing and luscious and whatever. It's not going to happen. So what are the compromises with money that we need to make now? Because ultimately we want a giving and receiving society. We don't want to have money, and we don't want the multinational corporations and multinational banks and world banks and everything to control us and have an effect on us. But we can't do anything if we can't go and buy seeds from somebody in a capitalist society. So unfortunately, we have to do a little bit to get a little bit to go and plant a little bit and build this bridge of transition to living on these beautiful, lush, sustainable teaching eco-villages. It's a journey. So, and the more money you have, the more seeds you buy, the bulldozers you can get to create the swales and the catchment dams and so on. But at what point is what you're doing more of a negative impact on the world than a positive impact? And I think that's the critical thing. If you're heading in the right direction with what you're doing, although you're compromising yourself by using money and using the multinational corporate currencies that are most dominant in the world, it's in the beginning, you have to compromise yourself. And then maybe you want to eventually end up with, as a secondary transition, have your own currency, which is the local community currency. So none of the wealth of the community gets taken out through taxes and all sorts of other things, profits and all that for the multinationals and banking interest and all that. And you have a local currency which everyone can buy and trade and whatever in the community, And doing so, what you've done now is you don't have all of the takeouts. And then, of course, you're returning the energy to the community. So that would be a compromise, a second compromise. And ultimately, you end up in a giving, receiving community where everything grows and anybody can take what they need. All right. So those who judge need to reevaluate if they live up to their own standards of perfection. It's often easier to point fingers at others' faults than to deal with your own. And how much are you trying to make a difference? I think that's it. It's a compromise to make a difference and create the world that we're heading towards is acceptable. And as long as you're not doing more damage than creating. And don't listen to those who attempt to bring you down. You will just waste your lifetime and your energy in self-doubt. Now, that's such a... Years ago, a friend of mine said, oh, help save our world is help SOW, and so means sow, SOW, a pig. So it's like, you've got to be careful of the words. And for years, I didn't touch help save our world because I thought, oh, I've messed up, But then I just gave up on my self-doubt and I said, okay, that's it. I'm using it and that's the way it is, because help sow, SOW, is to sow seeds. So to help sow, to help grow a better future was my intent and what my original concept was. So I stuck with that now and I use it, So I don't let people's silly comments get me down. All I can say is never give up hope, do your best, and never stop trying. Even if it seems like everything is lost, like it's all lost. Over is only over when you lose hope and give up. That's when it's over. Okay, anybody? Good.
So going back to the beginning of this segment here, which is carried through, I picked up on a few words, certainly the word perfect, alignment, judgment, and compromise. And I see that they are absolutely integrated in a similar thought process. And, as we know, there's no specific answer for perfection. We can go back to Plato's cave and saying, this is what you think you see, but those are only shadows. And perfection is actually this form up here, which is very different than what you're experiencing as a human being, let's say. And as I think we've all seen, the word perfection, or what is imperfection, has been massaged a lot in the past, I'm going to say 20 or 30 years, as a sociological construct. To help a lot of people who either have negative self-image or have been propagandized to the point where they believe the nonsense being thrown at them. So there's been, a recontextualization of what perfection is. Now, along with that, we have the word alignment. And alignment requires action of the communication so that we are focused on a very narrow point of distinction, let's say. And then from that comes judgment. Am I close to that alignment or not? And what judgment criteria am I using? And then I think the last word that came up is, well, we get to create a compromise. We're close enough, whatever amount of degrees separation it might be, that we believe we understand the same things and we will act accordingly. Now, each one of those areas has a lot of slosh, let's say, a lot of areas go off just a fraction of a degree, but if you go down that road, it takes you to a totally different place than the one we think we were traveling. So once again, it's a constant process of give and take, of communicate and receive feedback, of constant alignment. And I'll just end with one point. An airplane, when it's flying from point A to point B, is off course most of the time. And the job of the pilot or the autopilot is to correct it based on the circumstances that come up, whether it be wind or rainstorms or air traffic. It's a constant realignment. And when we see life as that, rather than, oops, I'm a mistake, I'm off a degree now because of the wind, that's a learning process. It's not an error. It's living in a dynamic situation with the life and the world that we're in, and correcting it based on what we said our goal was and are agreed upon, if we are aligned, and getting there in as safe and non-destructive a method as possible. I think that's where, of course, where sustainability comes in. Is yes, we're all agreed we want to live a happy life, but does happy mean being able to just eat and throw, and regardless of where it comes from and who it's going to annoy? Or do we live in alignment that allows everybody to have that same experience, which then requires your responsibility to be a lot different than I have no responsibility other than to myself? So I think those four words, perfect, align, judgment, compromise, extremely important. So yeah, good section here. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Kurt. Yeah, I love that analogy of an airplane. And of course, because I'm a sailor and I've sailed around the world, and the autopilots and actually sailing, you've got the currents, you've got the waves, you've got the wind, you've got a whole lot of factors like waves buffeting you and coming from a different direction, and the current, and there's just so many variables. So you constantly having to correct, but with really good sailors who race these sailing yachts around the world are really, really good at keeping their yachts on course. Like 1 degree off and no, got to bring it back. It's like just got to be like right on it. But generally, what happens is you end up like your corrections are much more wayward than that. I mean, going from Bimini to Miami or to Fort Lauderdale, there's anything from 3 to 5 knots of the Gulf Stream. So you're literally sailing for Miami at an angle,
Yeah.
It's quite an incredible, it really messes with your mind, Oh, I'm going there, but I'm going sideways.
Well, Dennis, I will take from now on the sailing analogy because I think it's way more apt. When we fly in a plane, unless we're a pilot, and there aren't too many of those in the world, there are a bunch, we're a passenger letting somebody else steer for us. When we're on a boat, whatever size it is, but we're the captain of it, we have to do exactly what you just expressed. And I think that's probably more likely our experience of life than paying for a ticket and having someone take us, right? It's a dynamic. This won't happen unless I'm attentive every moment that I'm awake. Or I could be, of course, just like that from so many factors. The good news is, if we know how to sail the ship, and this series is partly towards that, how do we steer ourselves towards a sustainable life and an effective and joyful life and a sharing life? So I'm going to use the sailing analogy and throw out the flying analogy now.
Yeah, there's so many variables and I mean, in life, there's just so many variables. So if you've got like a pretty good guidance system, which is the philosophy, you can sort of like self-correct as much as you need to as you guide yourself through, as you master your own life. Yeah, I love that. That's incredible. It's genius. Brendan?
I think it's like you say, a case of balance. I think it's a case of always set yourself up to be the best you can be, but never, I'm not too sure how to say it, but basically never set yourself up for failure. As long as you are trying, whether you fail or not, you still are winning at whatever you're trying. If you're trying your hardest to, for example, pass an exam at school, although school is overrated, if you're trying your hardest to pass an exam and you have tried and you just scrape through, but you know you've studied constantly, just because you didn't hit the goal in which you wanted to hit does not mean that you have failed. Just means that you have to do something different next time. You have to try something new.
I agree. It's a learning process. Do you want to comment, Kurt?
No, I was just shaking. I agree. I like what Brendan said, and yeah, when we try to excel at school, we're meeting somebody else's standards that didn't include me as my life experience coming into that course with what I know and how I learn. So to have an expectation, which I know schools don't, but to have an expectation that somebody will reach a 100% on every exam doesn't take into account the difference and the diversity of people that are participating in that class. And maybe to some degree they do. But for the individual hitting 65 or 75, when they feel as smart and as capable as the person that hits 100, there's some differences in how they approach the exam and they approach learning and they approach school. And to make people wrong on any level about that, rather than to acknowledge the level they've attained and then work with them to either get an agreement about studying differently or getting a conference every now and then to check in on how they're doing outside of school, or to get the auxiliary help. These are all things that we may need to do in order to meet the outside established goals, which don't always acknowledge the variety of intellects that are in the world, and sometimes they squash intellects with people trying to fit in to a shape that is not them. So yeah. I agree with you, Brendan. Yep.
Kurt, your image has disappeared and turned into, there you go. Now your image has come back. All that time you were talking, it was like, I don't know what that was, bright light. But,
well, that's exactly what was coming through. Bright light.
Oh, wow. There's a lot of damage done with expectations of getting A's and whatever in very specific learning modalities, and everyone is unique, and you might have the most intelligent dyslexic person in your class actually not even passing, but understanding everything so incredibly well, but he can't write his thoughts down or whatever, So some of the most successful people, many successful people I know in life are brilliant, but they just were no good at school. I don't want to bring up personal examples because they might be offended.
I have an analogy. I have an analogy now that we're on this, just about the concept of sustainability, and especially with our food supply, and how many people will not eat a fruit or a vegetable if it's misshapen or a little bit off color. And many of that is thrown away, in the selection process, or I don't know where they send it, but we're so conditioned to look at the perfection, which is unnatural, right? You and I both grew up, I'm sure, picking fruits off of trees, and whatever the shape was irrelevant. If it still tasted great, to us, and was nutritious, we ate it. Whereas now, if it's not polished and waxed and presented on a display that just shows everything to be uniform, we might avoid it. So, not to push that too far, but I can see how sustainability, if one works with allow fruits to be who they are, rather than, GMO fruits to make them look like what somebody thinks is perfection and more appealing so they can make profits. I think that's a big difference that we have to deal with in people's concepts of sustainability versus getting what somebody tells us is the better fruit.
It's like, just let nature be, if you want to take from nature, take it as it is. Don't try and alter it. Just let it grow, let it be the way it is,
It's actually a really interesting thing. South Africa grows this huge amount of produce, all sorts of fruits and nuts and everything. And we send them to all over the world. But the A-grade fruit leaves the country and ends up in America or in Britain or wherever. And all of the B-grade, C, D, whatever, that gets sold to us. So the likelihood that we'll get the misshapen fruit is great where we come from. But, I don't see people complaining. So,
it wouldn't be so bad if the profits from selling the A-grade fruit went back to the people in the country that grew it. But we know they don't. They go to the exporter and distributors and nonsense. Yeah. So yeah, it's the way of the world for profit.
Yeah. Capitalism. It's a really an interesting thing. I've been having discussions with people about that, and it's like, oh, if it's not capitalism, then it's socialism. No, it's not, you idiot. Those are the words that are sold to you in propaganda. The use of language in propaganda and the misuse of concepts to turn people away from what they should be doing. It's just, it makes me crazy. It's like socialism as applied by the socialists in Russia and so on. If you look at that, it's really a centralized control of a capital and labor-based system. And capitalism is a capital and labor-based system. Yeah. So just because people are now growing their fruits and vegetables and everything, and they're living in eco-villages, now that's socialism? No, it's not. It's got nothing to do with centralized labor and power. It's about living in a loving, caring, giving and receiving community, It's about caring for one another and caring for the planet. It's like, but people are, they listen to the news and media, and they just accept without thinking that the nonsense that they're being fed, and they just regurgitate it. It's like I used to go to squash and many years ago, go play at the prisons because I had a friend at the prisons there, and every day I would arrive there, all of the other guys would repeat what they had read in the newspapers or had seen on television that day. And I'm like, dude, stop and think for yourself. Why did they say that? And is it true? What is the agenda behind this? And not too many people were interested in hearing what was the truth and what they were trying to do. So it's easier just to be a sheep and a follower than it is to be a thinker.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, I know you have some other things to cover. I don't know how long, but on the words communism, capitalism, socialism, I think all of them in their pristine distinction are very good concepts. Communism comes from communal. What's wrong with having a communal system where people share? Capitalism, what's wrong with investing money so that others can benefit from that investment and that? Socialism, are we not social beings? Well, maybe not everybody is, but what's wrong with having a society? Regardless of who you are part of a society, whether it's a society to carry rifles or it's a society to produce sustainability, right? We're all part of a group, and that's a social group. So I think the problem is that the people that manipulate those words and those systems are the ones that have created the negativity about them in each one of those words. And then depending on which society we live in, we are propagandized and chauvinized, if you know that word. It's just a forceful push towards a particular belief system, whether it's your nation or even an idea, so that we don't see the objective view anymore. We're just covered in this bubble of whatever label's been put on it. And we're right and everybody else is wrong, and we don't want to be wrong, so we'll just continue to spout and even repeat the news that we hear, just to show that we're good citizens in whatever situation we're in. And as we're seeing, it just doesn't work to keep the world going anymore. It's nonsense to run those distinctions versus the original ones. And that's the world we live in now. The world we live in has large factions promoting their particular system, whichever it is. And that's the world we get to help save, is the pristine world, not the world that it's become through, as you know, the pyramid schemes of power.
It's awesome. Yeah, I'm actually quite shocked that we've come to 5:02. Well, I know we messed around a bit in the beginning, but an hour has basically passed, and I'm sure everyone wants to go on their own journey. So I think what we'll do is we'll call it a day. If anyone wants to stay and speak, it's fine, talk. We'll just call that the end of that meeting, and we'll go on next time with when teaching others. Always, like, I come back to this thing that words matter. Just remember how, and I brought it up earlier on. Certain words have weight. They have multiple meanings. So that's what I'm going to be carrying on with next week. All right. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day and evening, Brennan, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. Always
Have
a valuable hour. Thanks, Dennis.
All right.
Have a
good.
great weekend.
Take it easy.
Great
Hey?
week next week.
All right. Thanks.